Do you have a better understanding of this damaged vehicle policy, or is this just becoming a bit of a mess?
I don't, Joe. I've never understood this policy. I don't know why it exists. I think it is the most counterintuitive, asinine policy that we have in NASCAR today. And you know how I feel about certain other rules in this sport that have come into effect here in the last 20 years. Hello, playoffs. Hello, NASCAR overtime. Hello, stage racing. Hello, NASCAR charters, which are back in the news again because of the lawsuit going on with 2311 and Front Row. But I at least understand the rationale behind all of those. This is one where I don't even understand the thought process behind it. I've just heard part of Elton Sawyer's media availability and him talking about how, oh, we don't want to put good cars out of the race. We don't want to, create any sort of confusion with the situation here. But that's all that we've gotten ever since this system was introduced. This policy was introduced here. I remember when it was just 5 minutes. Now it's fortunately a little bit longer than that. But I think if I had to think of a rationale for it, it would be this idea that if your car is so damaged in a crash that you have to take it back to the garage in order to repair it, there's no sense in you coming back out there on track. I disagree with that, but I think this rule that has been created now with this policy is completely counterintuitive, because if the goal was to prevent rushed repair jobs being done as quickly as possible in the garage to go out and log as many laps as you can, well, now you've coupled that with the fact that you have to remain on pit road and you have limited resources and limited tools in your garage stall, or in your pit stall rather than your garage spot in the garage there. You have limited resources and you have limited time. You only have however many minutes it is to get your repair job done. And then you have to go out there and try to putter around fast enough to make a minimum speed. If anything, it just creates an even bigger problem than we had with guys coming back out of the garage. And since we're at Talladega today, Joe, I remember the spring race here in 2009 when, everybody remembers the finish with Brad Keselowski and Carl Everts and everything. But if I recall correctly, I believe that was the race where there was a wreck very early on, I think lap 8 or lap 10 or so, very early in the race, took out a bunch of cars. And Clint Bowyer was on this DNF-free streak, running at the finish streak that dated back, I think, like 2.5 years. It was up to something like 70 or 80 races. And he got caught up in that wreck. And he ended up having his crew in the garage for the entire 2, 3, 4 hours, whatever it was, for the remainder of the race. They were going at that car, trying to repair it and get it to the point where he could come back out and just log a couple of laps at the end of the race, which he did, and be credited with running at the finish. And I love that. That's a never give up attitude. It makes, it may not make a difference to some fans, but, we talk all the time about major playoff implications, 1 point above the cut line or below the cut line. You just never know when these points are going to make a difference. And this time of year, more than ever, every point matters. Every position matters on track. And so for these drivers to be told, you can't even let them take the window net down because the window net possesses some sort of magical power that puts you out of the race, like if they take it down, it's just absolutely asinine to me. I don't understand why this is still a rule, because NASCAR apparently can't even enforce it with their own. I mean, at least they're consistent on being inconsistent. What do we talk about all the time? Right? Consistently inconsistent. Chalk up another point for them in that column here with the DVP. I don't understand it at all. And even Bob Pockrass, I think, in interviewing Josh Berry in the bullpen after he was taken out, even Bob said, I hope they change the rule next year, because it's tough for us to keep track of as journalists, and clearly the drivers and crew chiefs feel the same way. So again, it's never a rule I've liked. It's a rule that I've never fully understood. And certainly this year more than ever, with the next gen car and all the issues that car has gone through in the almost 3 years that we've had it introduced now, I think it's only just further accelerated the problems and highlighted the flaws even more with the DVP. And if you ask me, we don't need to reform the policy. We don't need to revise the policy. We need to abolish the policy. And I hope that they do that in 2025. If you're on Twitter, you'll get this reference. This isn't Formula One. That all blew up a couple of years ago with teams running the same sponsor on multiple cars and everything. But I think in this situation, I think we can say this isn't Formula One, because in Formula One, only the top half of the field gets points. So if you spin out into the gravel and you lose 2 laps, even if your car has no damage, there's really no point in you staying out there, right? In fact, you probably want to retire the car because you don't want to waste miles on your engine and your parts and everything. You want to save those resources. In NASCAR, every position is 1 point, right? Every point matters. Every position matters. I just pulled up the results from the 2009 Aaron's 499 here. Mark Martin, Jaden McMurray, Scott Riggs, David Gilliland, they were all in that crash. I guess it happened on lap 7, like I was mentioning. So they were all listed as six laps complete with an accident as the reason for DNF. So Clint Bowyer is listed as 8 laps complete, but he's running at the finish. So not only does he keep that streak going, if he was running behind Gilliland or Riggs at the time, I don't know off the top of my head if he made any positions up from that, but maybe that's at the time 3 or 6 points. that he would have made up. And who knows if that makes a difference come race 26 for Chase for the Cup cutoff. I remember Larry McReynolds joking in the booth about how, AJ Allmendinger and Casey Kane, Allmendinger was, this looks like 31 laps ahead of Kane at the time. So Kane was just trying to teach Allmendinger how the 2-car draft is working because AJ was still only in his 3rd full-time season and everything. And they were just going out to log laps to gain AJ some experience. Great, good for him. But then the battle between Jeff Gordon and Kevin Harvick was a battle for position, even though those guys were 50-plus laps down, because they had the same amount of time spent in the garage area and came back out onto the track around roughly the same laps. They were actually fighting for a few points there. So, I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Maybe the average fan doesn't care about that. But I feel like in an era where we put so much emphasis on who's 1 point above the cut line, we've got the announcers screaming in the booth, look at this is major playoff implications here. So-and-so is 1 point to the good or 2 points outside where he needs to be. These are the kind of battles that we would be all over if we didn't have the damaged vehicle policy, if we still had the ability to make higher quality repairs in the garage area and send these guys back out to gain 2 or 3 spots, to gain whatever points they could have a shot at gaining, and that could potentially make a difference for their championship. You just never know. So it's an incredibly frustrating rule to me. And like I said, I think there's no better way to revise the system and get rid of this controversy than just getting rid of the rule altogether. Joe, I remember before we came onto the air, we were talking about, Mark Martin's car and that famous image of his hood completely torn off, his front bumper completely torn off. It looks like he's driving a modified and he's got the number 6 that's just taped or drawn on the side of his car. Like, I miss those days. I wish we could get back to that, but we're never going to get back to that if we still have a DVP.